It's happening. It's really happening. And this historical model has predicted it before and tells us exactly when it's all going to go down. Yup, we talking about the third dispute of a global scale. Don't make me say it. William Strauss and Neil Howe broke it all down in their book, The Fourth Turning, that kind of broke the internet. Trust me when I say this is gonna absolutely blow your dick off. What they uncovered is that history literally repeats itself in 80-year blocks, roughly the length of a human lifetime. Each of these blocks contain what we call 4 turnings, around 20 years each. Now listen, this ain't no coincidence theory or tinfoil hat talk either. It's just pure human behavioral and social economics, a cycle that we've been in the past couple hundred years, which is just as predictable and calculable as our day-night cycles, the lunar phases, the seasons of the year. These turnings are basically just generations, and we've seen them happen again and again and again like clockwork. So the first of these turnings is a high, an upbeat era, usually following a victory after a very stressful and difficult event. Our most recent high was in 1946 to 1964, right after WW2, where we had the most even wealth distribution that we can remember, and people could afford a house working at like Pizza Hut. During this time, we see some crazy cultural advancements with things like rock and roll, TV, sending people to space, new household technologies, flashy cars. Life is good and everyone obeys. Then we have the awakening, an era of passion and open-mindedness. After a high, people feel good, and when you feel good, you get creative, thinking outside the box, going against the norm. Our last awakening was in 1964 to 1984, where nonconformity and being different was the in thing to do. This gave us things like artists with cult followings, the Beatles, drugs, hippies, Woodstock, Star Wars, women's rights, home computers like Windows and Mac. Society seems to be progressing with almost a rebel-like spirit. The third generation is an unraveling, when things start to get messy. Coming off an awakening, people want to start seeing the change they advocated everywhere and are willing to do anything to make that change permanent. And others are very against that change, so the seeds of disagreement are sown. The last unraveling lasted from about 1984 to 2008, and is the time that we saw the fall of the Soviet Union, music like grunge and rap sang about violence and deterioration, the LA riots, OJ Simpson trials, 910+1, the Afghan and Iraqi wars, which all finally ended with the financial housing crisis of 2008, where it gets even worse. The fourth turning is the one that no one wants to talk about, a crisis, which itself ends with the most extreme event of the 80-year block. And that's where we are right now, estimated to last about 20 years give or take, starting in 2008. Reminder, this book was written in 1997, so it already kinda called it, predicting what's happening right now, and we're right on schedule, Johnny boy. After an unraveling, the pot has been stirred, and people just kinda wanna see how much they can get away with. Sound familiar? We see the most polarizing political divide we've ever seen in our lifetimes, a pandemic, increasing government control and censorship, more senseless wars breaking out left and right, and a liberal rights movement that's lost its own mind. Seems like for the past 5 years, you can turn on the news at any time and the next big thing was going down, kinda like it feels like it is right now. Okay, now listen to this, cause I don't know, this kinda tripped me out. Our last crisis, fourth turning, was the Great Depression, which ended with the end of WW2 in 1945. These history blocks are said to repeat every 80 years, so let's do some math. 80 years before 1945 was 1865, and guess what ended that exact same year? The Civil War, the deadliest war in American history, which was that period's fourth turning, after following the exact same pattern that we're going through right now. Might be a coincidence, right? Let's take it a step further. 80 years before 1865 was 1785, and guess what ended just 2 years before that? The American Revolution. Probably the most significant and important conflict in American history, which started America itself and ended their period of crisis. Reminder too that 80 years is just a rough ballpark. This is human nature after all, not hard math. And 80 years before that, we just had a bunch of pioneers still figuring it out. So we really didn't have much of a society in the West to propagate a full history block. Okay, now that's all past and done. When is the next crisis fourth turning according to this timeline that hasn't missed once in the past 300 years? Our last one ended in 1945. If I punch in 1945 plus 80, our next one should end in 2025. Bro, I can't make this shit up. According to the cycle, we will experience the extreme event that ends our crisis around this time. This entire historical human behavioral analysis boils down to the old adage we've heard many times before. Strong men make easy times make soft men make hard times, and hard times make strong men, which also just so happens to come in a cycle of 4. So will you let these times make you stronger?